They told her to play the violin as a joke, but when she did, the whole room stopped breathing. They didn't even try to hide it. It was fifth period, last row by the window. That's where Nia Forrester always sat. Same spot, same silence, same worn violin case tucked between her knees like it was made of glass. She rarely looked up unless her name was called, and even then, she barely said more than what was needed. Just another quiet kid trying to stay invisible. But that day, she became the center of attention, and not in the way anyone would want. "All right, folks," said Mr. Buckley, the PE teacher somehow in charge of the school's upcoming talent showcase. "We've got spots open. Singers, dancers, magicians, whatever you got, bring it." His voice carried that usual half-joking, half-serious tone, like he wasn't sure why he was even making the announcement. Then came the moment. Ms. Dorsey, the math teacher who always wore the same beige sweater and acted like she ran the building, nudged Mr. Buckley and tilted her head toward Nia's seat. "What about our little violinist over there?" she said, smirking, loud enough for half the class to hear. Buckley chuckled without thinking. "Yeah, come on, Forrester. Show us what that thing can really do. You've been carrying it around all year. Might as well make it worth the wait." The room burst into laughter. It wasn't the kind of laughter that stings immediately. It crept up slowly, disguised as harmless teasing. But Nia felt it for what it really was, a dare. Not encouragement, not respect. Just a joke they assumed she wouldn't understand, or worse, wouldn't mind. Her fingers tightened around the neck of her violin case. She didn't look up. Not yet. In the row ahead, a boy whispered something about cat screeches. Someone else mimicked a screechy string sound. It spread like spilled paint, messy, fast, impossible to clean up. Ms. Dorsey smiled like she'd done something sweet. "Just teasing, sweetheart," she added, brushing it off like it was a feather. That was when Nia finally looked up, straight ahead, not at the teachers, not at the kids, just past them. "I'll do it," she said, flat, calm, like she was ordering food at a drive-thru. The room went dead quiet. Even Buckley blinked. "You serious?" Nia didn't repeat herself. She didn't need to. She just slid the violin case off her lap, placed it on the desk, and started filling out the clipboard being passed around. No drama, no eye contact. Just her name, Nia Forrester, on the line. Ms. Dorsey laughed again, but softer now. "Well, that's the spirit, I guess." But behind her smile, there was a flicker of something else. Doubt. Maybe even discomfort. She hadn't expected Nia to say yes. She expected her to shrink. The rest of the day moved on like it always did. Bell rings, lockers slam, sneakers squeak across the halls. But something had shifted quietly under the surface. Because here's the thing. They didn't know who she was. Not really. They saw a quiet black girl who barely spoke, who brought a violin to school like she was trying too hard to be different. They didn't know about the third-floor apartment she shared with her mom and little brother, or how she practiced with a towel stuffed under her door so the neighbors wouldn't bang on the wall. They didn't know that violin wasn't a hobby. It was the one thing she had that felt like hers, and now they were all going to see it. But just because she said yes didn't mean she wasn't scared. Her name wasn't the kind people remembered right away. Nia Forrester didn't stand out in the hallways of Toledo Central Middle School. She wasn't loud, she didn't hang out by the vending machines, and she didn't snap back when kids made slick comments under their breath. She just kept walking, violin case always in hand, shoulders a little tight, like she'd gotten used to taking up less space than she deserved. But if you followed her home, if you walked the 4 blocks from the school, crossed under the faded mural near Collingwood Boulevard, and climbed the crooked stairs to apartment 3C, you'd see the real Nia, not the girl who barely whispered in class. The girl who lived inside a storm of sound. The violin case clicked open as soon as the front door shut behind her. No snack, no TV, just her music, and the peeling wall in her shared bedroom. Her mom's voice echoed faintly from the kitchen. "That you, baby?" "Yeah." "You eat anything yet?" "Not hungry." "You should eat. Don't make me come in there." Nia smiled, just a little. Her mom always said that, and she meant it, but she never came in, not when Nia was practicing. Her mom, Monica Forrester, worked nights cleaning offices downtown. She left around 6:30 every evening, right after dinner, and didn't get back until just before dawn. Nia knew she was tired. She also knew her mom listened from the other side of the wall every night. That was the rule. No speakers, no headphones, just raw sound. If Nia was off pitch, if her rhythm broke, her mom would tap gently on the wall 3 times. That meant start over. No anger, no shame, just get it right. Again, her mom would say, even from the hallway. Again, baby. Most nights, Nia practiced until her fingertips went numb. Her violin wasn't fancy. It had scratches from old hands, a loose peg she had to tighten every few minutes, and a bow that frayed at the edges like an old shoelace. But it sang when she played it. It cried. It screamed. It whispered. It was the only way Nia knew how to speak out loud. She had started learning at 7. Her grandfather, who passed away when she was 9, had played blues on a beat-up fiddle. She remembered his laugh, the way his fingers moved like they were dancing, and how he always said, "Let the instrument tell your truth when you can't." So she did. At school, kids rolled their eyes when she pulled out her violin for lunch period practice. Teachers smiled politely but never asked about it. Not until the joke. Not until Buckley and Dorsey turned her whole year into a punchline. But Nia had already been working on something, a piece, one she'd written herself, half classical, half blues, all pain. It had no name. She didn't think it needed one. What it had was feeling, grit, soul, and a secret that only she and her violin understood. Because behind that quiet, behind the tired hoodie and knotted sneakers, Nia Forrester was a storm. And for the first time, she wasn't going to hold it in. But wanting to prove something is one thing. Actually standing in front of the whole school and doing it, that was another. The next morning, the sign-up sheet was posted by the front office window, right next to the old vending machine that never worked. Kids huddled around it, fingers dragging down the list, scanning for names they recognized, hoping for drama, hoping someone would embarrass themselves. Nia's name sat quietly at number 16. Some squinted like they thought it was a mistake. "Who's Nia Forrester?" someone asked, chewing the end of a pencil. "She's that girl with the violin," another said. "Never talks. Probably gonna play Mary Had a Little Lamb and cry." Laughter. Again. Always laughter. But Nia didn't flinch. She walked past them like she didn't hear it. Truth was, she heard every word, memorized it, folded it up, and put it in her chest like fuel. At lunch, Mr. Buckley stood by the basketball courts pretending to care who signed up. "Talent shows on Friday," he called out. "No turning back now." He spotted Nia at the edge of the yard, tuning her violin in her lap. "You ready, Forrester?" he called with a grin. She gave him a look that wasn't mean, wasn't friendly either, just blank, like he wasn't worth the energy it would take to answer. He raised his eyebrows and turned away. Inside the teacher's lounge, Miss Dorsey sipped her coffee, flipping through a list of performances. "Seriously, who let her sign up?" she asked, motioning to Nia's name. "She signed up herself," said Mrs. Tran, the art teacher. "She's got the same right as the rest." Miss Dorsey shook her head. "It's not about rights, it's about awareness. She's setting herself up. You really think she's going to stand on stage and not fall apart? I think maybe she surprises you," Mrs. Tran said. Then she turned back to her crossword. Miss Dorsey didn't reply, but something in her jaw said she wasn't ready to admit she might be wrong. That afternoon, Nia sat on the edge of her bed with her violin and a blank notebook. Her mom leaned against the doorframe, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. Nia nodded without looking up. "I already said yes." Her mom walked in and sat beside her, picking up the frayed bow. "You don't gotta prove nothing to people who don't even see you. You know that, right? I'm not doing it for them." "Then who?" Nia thought for a second, eyes drifting to the water stain on the ceiling. "I guess, me," her mom smiled, pulled her close. "Then do it right." At school, whispers grew louder as the week went on. Kids started making bets. Some said she'd chicken out. Others said she'd freeze. A few even said maybe she could actually play, but still laughed when they said it. Only one person really talked to her, Malik, a soft-spoken 7th grader who played piano after school. He caught up with her near the library. "You doing original or something famous?" Nia blinked. "Original?" He smiled. "Good. Do something they can't compare to nothing else. She didn't smile back, but she nodded once. That was enough. Friday came fast. The stage was set up in the gym. Fold-out chairs, scuffed floors, squeaky mic. Parents would arrive later, but for now, it was students and teachers only. One by one, the acts went up. Singers, dancers, a kid who told knock-knock jokes. The crowd clapped, some polite, some fake. Phones were out. Everything was being recorded. Everyone waited for someone to fall. Nia sat backstage with her violin across her lap, fingers tapping the wood like Morse code. Number 16, her number. But when they called her name and she stood up, no one expected what came next. The hallway outside apartment 3C always smelled like old carpet and reheated noodles. That's what Nia came home to every day. That and silence. Except for the sounds she made herself. As soon as her backpack hit the floor, she pulled out her violin. No snacks, no scrolling through her phone, no time for that. Just music. Practice. Over and over again. The piece she planned to play didn't have a name. It didn't need one. It started soft, just a few notes that sounded like something slipping out from under a locked door. Then came the shift, that sudden pull that made people sit up straight. That's what she worked hardest on, the transition. Her grandfather used to say, make them feel like they've been dragged through something real, then give them peace at the end. She played barefoot on the carpet, her toes curling whenever she hit a note wrong. She didn't use sheet music. Everything was inside her head. And her hands? They moved like they'd been doing this for 20 years. But it wasn't easy. Her bow was splitting at the ends, and the E-string buzzed if she pressed too hard. The bridge leaned just slightly to the left. Every couple of hours, she had to retune the whole thing from scratch. Still, she didn't complain. Her little brother, Miles, 6 years old and constantly curious, sat in the doorway watching her one night. You gonna win? He asked. Nia shrugged without stopping. Why don't you play happy songs? He added. She paused, looking at him. I do. He scrunched his nose. They sound like crying. Sometimes happy and sad sound the same, she said. He didn't get it, but he nodded anyway and wandered off. Her mom came in around midnight, dropping her keys on the kitchen counter. Her feet were swollen. Her uniform smelled like bleach. You still at it? Nia was stretched out on the floor, her violin beside her like a sleeping pet. Almost done. Monica stepped over her and disappeared into the bathroom. When she came back out, she had a damp towel and sat beside Nia, pressing it against her hands. You push too hard, your hands will give out, she warned. They already feel numb. Exactly. They sat there in quiet. Not awkward silence, just the kind you earn after knowing someone forever. You sure about tomorrow? Nia didn't even blink. Yeah? Monica looked at her daughter, the way her eyes didn't flinch, the way her shoulders didn't shake, even though her fingers did. Okay then. Make 'em listen. The morning of the show, Nia didn't eat much. Just a dry slice of toast and some water. Her hands were stiff, but she stretched them out over and over again on the way to school. When she got there, the gym smelled like too much floor polish and too many bodies packed into folding chairs. She peeked behind the curtain. People were already there. Whole classes. Teachers. Staff. The janitor. Even the assistant principal, standing near the back with a clipboard. And phones. Everywhere. It wasn't nerves that hit her. It was heat. Her face flushed. Her fingers shook. Her stomach flipped. 16, someone whispered from backstage. She's number 16. The whisper felt louder than it was. Nia found a corner and sat down with her violin across her knees. She closed her eyes. She didn't think about Buckley, or Dorsey, or the kids waiting to laugh. She thought about her mom's towel-wrapped hands, about Miles at the doorway, about her grandfather's words. Make 'em feel it. That's all she had to do. But it only takes 1 second, one crack in your voice or one slip of the bow to lose everything. They called her name like they were unsure how to say it. Next up, Nia Forrester? The room didn't clap right away, just a few awkward taps, some murmurs, a cough, a sneaker squeaking against the gym floor. Nia stood from her chair backstage like she was being pulled by an invisible string, her violin in one hand, bow in the other. Step by step, she moved toward the stage. Kids in the front row elbowed each other. Some had their phones out already. She stopped in the center. No microphone. Just a single light buzzing overhead and a cheap folding chair someone had dragged out for her. She didn't sit. She didn't say anything. She just lifted the violin to her shoulder. And then, nothing. A few seconds passed. Mr. Buckley cleared his throat somewhere near the stage door. Miss Dorsey leaned forward in her seat like she was waiting for the punchline. In the audience, someone muttered, "She's choking." But then, she played. The first note was thin, barely there. It trembled in the air like it was scared to be heard, but she held it, stretched it, and let it bloom. By the time she reached the fifth note, the gym was completely still. No more whispering, no more giggling, just Nia. The piece didn't sound like anything they'd heard before. It wasn't a song from TikTok or some movie score. It was deeper, raw. Her bow danced across the strings like she was trying to say something with her whole body. At first, it was slow, deliberate, like a conversation between someone hurt and someone healing. Then, halfway through, it shifted. She bent the strings like they were crying out, her left hand moving fast across the neck. The sound twisted, pulled, surged like something fighting to break loose. Her eyes were closed, not because she was nervous, because she didn't need them open. Everything she wanted to say was coming through the strings. The moment she hit the highest note, she held it so long the air felt heavy. People forgot to breathe. Even Buckley, who'd been scrolling through his phone moments earlier, was locked in. A few teachers leaned forward, confused, maybe even ashamed. Dorsey didn't say a word. When the piece started to slow, Nia dragged the final note out like a thread unraveling. It didn't fade, it lingered. And when it ended, she didn't move. She just stood there, still, bow down, violin resting against her chest like a heartbeat. The gym was dead quiet. And then, slowly, one clap from the back, then another, then a few more, then the whole room. No one was yelling. No one was laughing. They were clapping like they didn't know how else to respond. Some kids looked down at their phones, ashamed they'd even recorded her, expecting a train wreck. Malik, seated near the middle, stood up first. Then a few more followed. And finally, the ones who'd said she'd chicken out stood too. When Nia walked off stage, she didn't smile. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. She just held the violin a little tighter. Backstage, Buckley nodded at her like he was trying to act like he'd always believed in her. But he didn't say anything. Neither did Dorsey. She looked like she was chewing on her own silence. Mrs. Tran met her by the water fountain and handed her a folded piece of paper. "You made them feel it," she said, soft. Nia opened it when she got to the hallway. It was just a short note. "When they don't expect you to shine, shine anyway." Later that night, her mom was waiting by the front door. She didn't even ask how it went. She just looked at Nia's face and nodded. "You did it?" "Yeah." "Did they listen?" "Yeah." Monica wrapped her arms around her and whispered into her hair, "I hope they never forget." But applause fades, and the real change comes after the clapping stops. Monday came with overcast skies and the smell of wet pavement, the kind of weather that usually made people move slower, quieter, but not this time. As soon as Nia stepped through the school's front doors, something was different. People looked at her, not with side eyes or smirks, but with curiosity, with respect. Some nodded. A few just moved out of her way. One girl even whispered, "That's her," like she was talking about someone famous. It wasn't fame, though. It was recognition, the kind Nia had never asked for, but now couldn't avoid. She walked past Mr. Buckley in the hallway. He tried to flash a friendly smile, phone still in hand. "Hey, amazing job Friday," he said, awkward. Nia gave a small nod and kept walking. Then came Ms. Dorsey. She was standing at her door, holding a stack of worksheets like always. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just looked at Nia like she was searching for a version of her she hadn't bothered to see before. "Miss Forrester," she said, careful, "can I have a word?" Nia stopped, but didn't move closer. Ms. Dorsey cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology. What I said last week wasn't right." A long pause. Nia just looked at her. "I shouldn't have made assumptions. I'm still learning." Nia thought about saying something sharp, something she'd had locked and loaded since that first laugh, but she didn't. Instead, she looked her in the eye and said, "You should have seen me before Friday." Ms. Dorsey blinked. That hit harder than a comeback ever could. Nia turned and walked away. She wasn't bitter, she wasn't angry, she was just done being ignored. In the cafeteria, Malik slid her a carton of chocolate milk without saying a word. He grinned. "Next time, we play a duet." She smirked, then rolled her eyes. "You're not ready." The sound of her laugh, even just that little bit, turned a few heads. It was the first time most had ever heard it. At home that evening, she didn't pick up her violin right away. She sat on the couch next to her little brother, watching cartoons with the sound off. Her mom peeked out from the kitchen. "You not practicing?" "Not tonight," Nia said. "You good?" She thought for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm good." Not everyone clapped because they cared. Not everyone who stood that day changed overnight. But some did. And sometimes that's enough to start something. Some people won't see you until you force them to listen. So play your truth anyway. If you've ever been doubted, overlooked, or laughed at, remember Nia. Remember that silence is powerful. But your voice, in whatever form it takes, is louder. Tell your story. Let them hear it.